Hey guys, welcome back. In the last lesson, we talked about how the read and write operation in HDFS works behind the scenes. In this lesson, we'll learn how to do a read and write operation by writing simple Java programs. When we execute a HDFS cat or copy from local command, Hadoop executes a Java program behind the scenes and does the actual work. We are going to simulate exactly that by writing our own Java programs. Actually, the program we are going to see is very simple. The first program we will write a file to HDFS. It will simulate the Hadoop FS copy from local command, in which we will read a file from the local file system and write it to HDFS. The second program we will write will simulate the Hadoop FS cat command, which will read the file from HDFS and print the contents of the file on the screen. Take a look at this project named HDFS. This project is a Mavenized project, meaning we are using Maven to manage the dependencies. Now let's look at this pom.xml file. In this file, we are defining all the dependencies, that is, all the jars that are needed to execute this project. So we are adding Hadoop core, Hadoop client libraries. Once we add those, you will see the dependencies will be added to the project under Maven dependencies. Beautiful. Now we have the needed libraries added to the class path. Let's write a Java program to write a file from local file system to HDFS. Let's look at the file write to HDFS Java program. It is a very simple program. It takes in two parameters. The first parameter is the file and its location in the local file system that will be copied to the location mentioned in the second parameter, which is a location in HDFS. We'll create an input stream using the buffered input stream object by using the first parameter, which is the location of the file in the local file system. These input stream objects are regular Java IO stream objects and not from Hadoop libraries, because we are still referencing a file from the local file system and not HDFS. Now we need to create an output stream to the file location in HDFS where we can write the contents of the file from the local file system. The very first thing we need to know is few key information about the cluster, like the location of the name node, etc. The details are already specified in the configuration files during the cluster setup. We'll talk more about the configuration files and the setup in our architecture chapter and also in the cluster setup lessons. The easiest way to get the configuration of the cluster is by instantiating the configuration object. This will read the configuration files from the class path and load all the configuration information that is needed for the program. In the next line, we'll get the file system object using the URI that we passed as the program input and the configuration that we just created. Since in the cluster configuration, we have configured to run this cluster using HDFS, the file system that will be returned. Once we have the file system object, the next thing we need is the output stream to the file to which we would like to write the contents of the file from the local file system. We will then call the create method on the file system object using the location of the file in HDFS, which we pass to the program as a second parameter. Then finally, we'll use the copy bytes method in Hadoop IO utils and we'll supply the input and the output stream object, which will read 4096 bytes at a time from the input stream and write it to the output stream, which will copy the entire file from the local file system to HDFS. That is it. We now have a program ready to write a file to HDFS. Let's now look at the file read from HDFS program. This program will take in an argument which is nothing but the fully qualified HDFS path to the file, which we wrote to HDFS using the first program, and would display the contents of the file on the screen. The program will simulate Hadoop FS-cat command. Just like the previous program, we instantiate the configuration object to get the configuration of the cluster. In the next line, we'll get the file system object using the URI that we passed as the program's input and the configuration that we just created. Since in the cluster configuration, we have configured to run this cluster using HDFS, the file system that will be returned will be distributed file system object. Once we have the file system object, the next thing we need is the input stream to the file that we would like to read. We can get the input stream by calling the open method on the file system object by supplying the HDFS URL of the file we would like to read. Then we will use copyBytes method from Hadoop's IOUtils class to read the entire contents of the file from the input stream and print it on the screen. That is it. Now we are ready to build this project and execute this program in our cluster. To build the project, right-click on this project and select Run as Maven Build. If you're running the project for the very first time, it will show you this screen, and for the goals, type in clean install and then click Run. Now Maven will start to build the project. Wait for the build to complete. Once the Maven build is complete, the project will be compiled into a jar. Copy the jar to the cluster. I've already done that, and the jar file is in HIRW workshop HDFS, and the jar file is named HDFS-0.0.1.jar. There's also a README file in that location. Open that file. The file which we will write to HDFS from the local file system is in HIRW workshop HDFS test file. Let's open the file using the VI editor just to look at the contents of the file. There you go. It's a very simple file just with 10 lines. All we are trying to do is write this file to HDFS using our program and then read back the file from HDFS using the program that we wrote. Now we want to write this file test-file to location user HIRW test file. So here is how we will execute the program. We can use plain Java to execute the program, but the inconvenience with that is we have to manually include all the Hadoop related jars in the class path. If you don't specify all the jars, you will get class not found exceptions. So for pure convenience, we will use Hadoop jar to execute the jar. This will include all the Hadoop related jar files in the class path. So you will say Hadoop jar, the location of the jar file, then specify the fully qualified program name, which is com hirw hdfs file write to hdfs, followed by two parameters. First parameter is the location of the file in the local file system, and the second parameter is the location in HDFS where the file should be copied. Let's run this command in our cluster. There you go. The program is now executed and we have copied the test file from the local file system to HDFS. Let's now run the same command for the file read from HDFS program to read the file which we just wrote to HDFS. So let's execute this in our cluster. There you go. We first wrote a file to HDFS and then read the same file from HDFS. That's a full cycle. Now, not only we know how to access HDFS using HDFS commands, we also know how to access HDFS by writing simple Java programs. With that, let's wrap this lesson. See you in the next lesson.